Hi everyone, most of you watch my channel without subscribing. Please subscribe if you like my stories. Have a good rest, friends. Today I'm going to tell you a dark story of how my wife's business trip completely changed my life. It was the end of July 2012. My wife Jenna had a quick work trip scheduled for that Thursday. She was flying out Thursday afternoon and returning Saturday morning, which was a common occurrence in Jenna's job. So I didn't think much of it. The time that Thursday morning before she left, we ate breakfast together like we always did. Jenna was her usual bubbly self. We were chatting about the upcoming work trip and how nice it would be to get away for a couple of days. I remember thinking she seemed extra excited about this particular trip at the time. I assumed it was just because she hadn't traveled for work in a few months. We kissed goodbye in the driveway as I left for work. "I'll call you when I land," Jenna said with a bright smile. I had no idea that would be the last genuine smile I'd see from her for a very long time. The days after Jenna left for her work trip passed by completely normally. We had our usual routine of texting each other, with periodic updates that she had landed safely. She texted me on Thursday afternoon, right after her flight, to say she was on her way to the hotel. "Have fun at your fancy client dinner tonight," I replied, saying to keep the lobster, as it was on the company card later that evening. She sent me a picture of the 5-course meal she was served. "You were right about the lobster." She texted me on Friday to say she had a great view of the Chicago skyline from her hotel window. She had meetings all day, but at least she had this view during her breaks. I replied that she had the day in the bag and we spoke on the phone later. She told me all about the clients. She was working with me, so I told her about my day at the office too. It was all so normal on Saturday morning. She texted me before her flight back saying she was all packed up and heading to the airport soon. She said she couldn't wait to be home. I texted back that I'd be waiting for her at the airport with bells on and that she should take safe travels. "You'll be back soon." I can't believe everything seemed so fine and ordinary. She was just texting me like she always did, giving updates and showing no signs that she'd betrayed me and thrown away our marriage behind my back. It just goes to show how easily on Saturday morning, I went to the airport to pick Jenna up. When she got off the plane, she gave me a quick kiss, but she seemed distracted. I figured it was just travel fatigue. That evening, we were getting ready to go to my stepdad's big 60th birthday dinner. As Jenna did her makeup, she seemed quieter than usual. I asked her a couple times if she was feeling okay, and she replied, yes, I'm fine." We chatted and laughed with my family like she usually does. If something was wrong, I certainly couldn't tell. Everything seemed normal and fine. The next day was Sunday, and we stuck to our usual weekend routine: grocery shopping, cleaning the house, catching up on errands. Chennai seemed maybe slightly less energetic than normal, but again I didn't think too much of it. One day rolled around, and Jenna headed back to work. We texted each other little updates throughout the day like we always do. Monday morning. On my way home from work, I got a text from Jenna. "I think I have a yeast infection. I'll get it checked out when I'm done with work." I replied, "That's a shame. They're the worst. Hopefully it's not an STD." I was joking, but Jenna simply wrote back, "Ha ha." She didn't use any emojis, which was unusual for her. My first clue that something was off was a few miles down the road. Later, before I'd even seen Jenna at home, she texted me again out of the blue. She said that the comment I made about it being an STD was kind of weird. She asked if I thought she was cheating on me. I thought that was an extremely strange reaction. I wrote back, "Ha, I knew, of course not. I was just joking around." She replied back immediately saying that everything was okay. She said that a quick response felt dismissive. I started to get an unsettled feeling in my gut. Something just felt off over the next few days. When Jenna got back, she kept complaining that her symptoms were getting worse. "The yeast infection is so painful and itchy now." She texted me on Wednesday afternoon saying she was going to try and get in to see Dr. Sanchez today to get this checked out again. "Oh no, that sounds miserable," I replied, hoping the doctor could give her stronger medication to get rid of it once and for all. When I got home from work that evening, Jenna was already in bed. The doctor confirmed it's a severe yeast infection and a case of bacterial vaginosis. She asked if he'd given her antibiotics. I said yes, he'd prescribed 2 different medications that I'd have to take for 2 weeks. For weeks on end, she said, "I've been feeling so unwell, I'm really looking forward to this finally going away." "I know, Han, you must feel awful. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help, I said, feeling pretty sympathetic. I'd not realized Jenna was blind to me the whole time. She knew full well these mystery infections were STDs she'd picked up from her dirty one-night stand, but at the time I felt nothing but concern. I also felt sorry for my wife and tried to help her as much as I could. I made her soup, gave her a back rub, and made sure she had everything she needed to get better. At the same time, she was hiding this horrible secret that would affect our lives. She didn't realize how much of an impact it would have. Eventually, her lies were going to come back to haunt her. At the next doctor's appointment, she told me she had a diagnosis of thrush along with a severe yeast infection. I didn't know what thrush was at the time, so Jen explained that it was an oral yeast infection. I thought it was best to keep my distance, given how sick she was. I had no idea at the time how crucial that instinct would turn out to be. Looking back, it seemed strange that she had these infections right after a work trip. It was clear something was wrong. Jenna ended up basically bedridden for the rest of that week. She called out sick from work and spent her days in bed or camped out on the couch. I felt bad for her. She was so miserable. I tried to keep my distance. By the end of the week, she was starting to improve, but things only got stranger from there. One evening, I got home from work and found Jenna. I found Jenna already lying in bed crying. I sat down next to her and rubbed her back, asking what was wrong. She sniffled, "Oh, it's nothing. I'm just not feeling like myself lately. I think I'm going to start seeing a counselor." I was puzzled because Jenna had never mentioned anything about struggling with depression or needing counseling. I tried gently asking if there was anything specific she wanted to talk about. I tried to get her to open up about it, but she said she was fine and just needed someone to chat with. I knew Jenna well enough to know there must be more going on, but she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Over the next couple of weeks, Jenna started therapy, but she was still evasive about what was bothering her. A few times I came home to find her crying. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing. She said strange things like, "Is this as good as it gets? Is this really what she wants out of life?" She seemed to be questioning her whole relationship, which completely blindsided me. We'd been happily married for 5 years at that point, and she never expressed doubts before. I started to realize that all these issues had emerged immediately after her work trip. My mind raced as I tried to. I had to figure out what could have possibly happened while she was away to cause such a drastic change in Jenna's mood and behavior. Then came the fateful night of 17 September. Jenna and I were getting ready for bed when she started crying again. I was frustrated and wanted to get to the bottom of this. "Jenna, I know something has been going on ever since your work trip. Please talk to me. Whatever it is, we'll get through this together." She shook her head bitterly. "If I tell you, you'll never want to work it out." My adrenaline spiked and I felt nauseous in that instant. I knew what was coming next. Jenna choked out, "I had a one-night stand on my work trip." In that moment, it felt like the entire world dropped down from under me. Suddenly, all the red flags and my instincts were right. I was shocked when Jenna told me what happened. She'd finished her client meeting and went to the hotel bar for a drink before going to bed. That was unusual because normally she'd go straight to her room. That night, something made her more sociable. She sat down at the bar and ordered a glass of wine. That's when a random businessman started chatting her up. Jenna said he was in his 42nd, tall and fairly handsome. She admitted that when he started flirting with her, it felt good to have the attention. The man asked what brought her to town. They realized they were both there on work. They made small talk about their jobs and where they were from. Jenna mentioned that we had no kids, and she seemed to offer up the personal detail all too freely as they chatted. One glass of wine turned into several, and both of them got more tipsy. Jenna claimed she lost track of how much she had to drink. Apparently, the businessman was buying them rounds, and she didn't want to turn it down. Around 3, it was 12 a.m. After hours of drinking together, the man suggested they get out of there and go somewhere more private. That should have been Jenna's cue to politely decline and head to her room alone, but unfortunately she agreed and left the bar with him. They took the elevator up to his hotel room, by her own admission. At that point, Jenna knew full well where things were headed, but she went anyway, despite being a married woman. Once inside his room, one thing led to another very quickly in her drunken, reckless state. Jenna's vows meant nothing. She gave herself to this stranger, betraying me and our marriage in the worst way. One thing led to another, and they had unprotected sex. Jenna saw she didn't even remember his name. The next morning she snuck back to her own room, filled with guilt and shame. But it was too late. She had made the choice that broke us. I sat there in stunned silence, unable to process the nuclear bomb that had just been dropped on our marriage. Jenna cried and pleaded for me to say something. Did he at least pull out? I heard. I asked myself, why didn't I think of that? Jenna whispered. It was all kind of a blur now. It was clear why she had come home from that trip with strange infections. This dirtbag had passed STDs onto my wife, the woman I loved and trusted. Jenna continued confessing through tears how handsome and charming he had been, how he made her feel sexy and desired. I was utterly destroyed hearing these details. My wife had broken our sacred vows for a worthless one-night stand. After the initial shock subsided, I became overwhelmed with anger. I was angry at the woman I loved, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. How could she do this to us? I asked Jenna angrily through tears. She flinched and tried to reach for my hand, saying, "Please, I'm sorry, let me explain." I pushed her hand away, unable to stand her touch. "There's no way to justify what you've done. You've ruined everything." Jenna's face crumpled and she started sobbing into her hands. I felt guilty seeing her like that, but I was too angry to comfort her. "I thought you were different, Jenna." I thought. What we had was real and meaningful. Now I see it was all a lie. "I see, please," she choked out. "What we have is everything to me. That one night was the biggest mistake of my life. You have to believe me." I let out a bitter laugh. "Believe you? How can I believe anything you say? My God, Jenna, we're married. He took vows and then you betrayed those vows for what? A cheap fling with some random guy?" She shook her head desperately. "It didn't mean anything. I swear I was drunk, and he paid attention to me. It made me feel wanted, but it wasn't real. You're the one I want to be with." Her excuses only angered me more. I gripped my hair in frustration, trying to make sense of how she could do something so selfish and cruel. "I feel like I didn't even know who you are." I said coldly, "The woman I love would never sneak around. If she'd been like this, she wouldn't have risked our marriage for a one-night stand." Jenna was sobbing into her hands. Normally, seeing her like that would have made me want to comfort her, but now it just filled me with more rage and resentment. "I don't think I can ever forgive." I said quietly, "You'll never regain my trust or understand the damage you've done with those last bitter words." I stormed away from Jenna. My heart was shattered beyond repair. The woman I'd loved so deeply was gone, replaced by a lying stranger I no longer knew. The weeks following Jenna's confession were some of the darkest times of my life. I was overwhelmed by an enormous range of excruciating emotions: grief, anger, humiliation, depression. My moods were a roller coaster. Some days I could barely get out of bed, skipping work, and I was laid up under the covers in despair. Other days I was so angry I'd find myself yelling and throwing things around the house. I stopped eating while sleeping normally. I lost weight. I lost focus at my job. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Jenna walked on eggshells around me during this time. She tried to gently encourage me to see a doctor, but I refused. I was too proud to admit how deeply this was affecting me. Finally, after having a full panic attack at work, I realized I needed help. My doctor prescribed I was prescribed antidepressants and anxiety medication, which helped me to function day to day. However, I still felt completely broken inside. The hurt and anger lingered right below the surface. Jenna continued trying desperately to make things right. She wanted to fix this, anything at all. She sent me apology letters, flowers, and suggested couples counseling, but I wasn't interested. I was no longer interested in the woman I'd loved. Our marriage was over. We continued living together, but we were no longer emotionally connected. The love we'd once had was replaced by distance, resentment, and distrust. I slept in the guest room. We passed each other like ghosts in the hallway. We had the odd conversation about household logistics. Our only interactions were limited to brief conversations about household logistics. There was no more laughter, warmth, or companionship. Just bitterness, hurt, and painful memories. Our once beautiful marriage was reduced to a hollow charade. The damage was irreversible. The deceit had poisoned everything. I knew the relationship I cherished was gone forever. No amount of apologies could bring it back. She continued her therapy, claiming she didn't understand why she'd done it. She was really sorry and asked me to forgive her for being unfaithful, but I couldn't. The memories were just too vivid. Maybe we could rebuild a friendship or at least a civil relationship over time, but I just couldn't get over it. I tried to heal myself through counseling and after a lot of thought, I realized I had to let go of Jenna completely if I was going to move on with my life. After months of back and forth, our marriage ended in a bitter divorce. I was devastated at first, but I came to accept that it was for the best. I knew I deserved a partner who would love and cherish me the way I did them. Jenna keeps apologizing and beating herself up over that one reckless night. I believe she is sincerely remorseful, but she can never undo the damage. Our romantic relationship was over the minute she made that choice. This painful chapter taught me a lot about trust, communication, and the fragility of love. I'm now more cautious, but still open to finding a true partner one day. If you're in my shoes, I'd say that with time, your heart will mend stronger than before. It's been 5 long months since Jenna's affair came to light and shattered our marriage in many ways. I'm still feeling completely lost and broken. The betrayal has left me with some pretty deep wounds. I'm not sure if they'll ever fully heal. Most days, I just go through the motions in a fog, not fully present. The sadness and anger follow me everywhere. I often skip social events and isolate myself at home, trying to avoid questions about how Jenna and I are doing. Last Friday the 13th was one of those bad days. It was pouring rain as I left work, but I barely noticed. I was absorbed in my own melancholy thoughts. I drove home on autopilot, staring straight ahead. I got to my street and suddenly remembered I didn't have any food at home. I was annoyed at having to drive again in the rain. I pulled back onto the main road without looking carefully and collided with an oncoming car. We were both going slowly, but there was still some damage. I sat there cursing myself as the rain continued to pour down. I'd caused an accident and inconvenienced someone else. I dreaded having to get out and face the other driver. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the rain to approach the other car. The driver was a woman who looked to be around my age. I apologized sincerely and told her that I hadn't been paying attention. She smiled kindly and said not to worry. She added that the damage wasn't too bad and asked if I was okay. I was taken aback by her gracious response and we exchanged information. She reassured me again not to worry. I was really hard on myself about it. It was so nice to be treated with such kindness after months of stress and bitterness. The next day, I decided to call her to check in again and take responsibility for my careless driving. It turned out her name was Nicole. She said she had no hard feelings at all. Nicole said right away, "But you know, a cup of coffee and some chocolate cake would make me feel even better." I laughed for the first time in longer than I could remember. I suggested meeting up that weekend over coffee. Nicole and I talked for hours. It was so easy to talk to her. I found myself opening up about my marriage falling apart, though I didn't go into the painful details. Neil shared about the patience she loses in her work as a doctor. "What you're going through sounds so hard, but the important thing is you have your health and your whole life ahead of you." Her words struck a chord deep within me. She was right. As long as I was still breathing, I had to keep moving forward. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I started dating again, taking it slow after living under a cloud of gloom for so long. I finally remembered what happiness felt like again. She was my ray of sunshine piercing through the darkness. Being with her energized and motivated me. I started taking better care of myself, reconnecting with friends and feeling genuinely excited for the future. I knew that with Nicole by my side, the next chapter of my life is going to be beautiful. I can't wait to build a family and share my world with her. Jenna deeply wounded me, but I'm healing and ready to love again.